So first up tonight, we have Serge Neptune. He's been called the Little Merman of British poetry, and those of you who have your screen big will notice that he's wearing his insignia on his lapel. His works appeared in Finnish Creatures, Perverse, Why Now, Harana Poetry, Lighthouse, Banshee, Spontaneous Poetics, Brittle Star, Ink, Sweat and Tears and Strange Poetry, among other places. And his pamphlet, These Queer Mere Boys, excuse me, Serge. These Queer Mere Boys came out last year with Broken Sleep Books. Serge also runs the amazing online series Neptune's Glitter House for Wayward Poets. And I think that's restarting in February. Do check it out. I'm sure Serge will tell you a bit more about it himself. Serge's poetry is amazingly tender, cuts right to the bone, and is also sinuously strong. Serge, take it away.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you for organising all of these. Thank you, Jenny, and thank you to the amazing Alice and Tolu. It's an honour to read with you guys. I'm going to start with a brand new poem which has recently been published in Queerlings, which is an online queer magazine. This poem is called Notes on Surviving Dry Land for an Inexperienced Merman. Don't let it startle you, the flutter of capricious pigeons, the smell of compost carbon monoxide, air burning, how breath comes easy, by lungs, by gills, by lungs again. What queer evolution led to this anatomy, cyanotic tinge of human skin, metallic refractions of the lower body, the half they could accept, the half they'd lynch you for, eyes accustomed to the depths, too feeble for the lily of the sun, muscles so flexible to swim, so adaptable on land. Trust the ground, the traction of the wide scales, prickling of shingles, tarmac, fins brushing the air behind, agile tendons curving the long spine, glands below the waist, secrete a mucus substance, keeping the tail clean, squishy skin, plasticity of neural control. One set of muscles pulls, the other gives in. Tilt the head forward, the rest will follow. How the world will fawn over you unless you show it. The squamous truth, the underside, the docile half, that swiftly falters. Some of you already know I am quite obsessed with mermen and mermaids. You may notice a mermaid on my blouser, so yeah. Okay. Let's start with, think of this as couples therapy, he said. Love is a recipe you should approach with care. One must respect its religion, every ritual gesture adding up to the final flavor. He dismantled the fish carcass, removed spine and skin, how the cobweb of its blood branched out across the pulp in tiny streams. He added the fish flakes to the saucepan, filled with milk and vegetables, kept all the utensils by his side. How each piece slowly blended to the next, the way vines entwine to one another until no wall is left. By then the kitchen was a limp joke of moisture. It glided in the steam like a starfish, and I set his prey, waiting for him to pull his innards out and suckle on my tissue, every stomach gland fizzing with joy. The floating game. Mr. Barnum, the circus master, repeats once more his word. I should take better care of my tail. The scales have lost their shine. Parasites spread on fins. Laceration and loss of skin may follow. Uncertain whether vet or physician can provide the right fix, they feed me pills to fill the chamber of my brain with smoke. Here in the tank, where I only swam in circles, tense with boredom, wondering if by now the skies are post-apocalyptic amber stuffed with bugs, or grim like the top shelf up there you haven't dusted in ages. A new day entails a new display of eccentricities. The wild and exotic caged tight and well, so spectators feel safe. By now I master the concrete art of raising a smile upon demand. Look, the crowd of monkeys cheerfully pointing at me as if I'm the strange one. When not cooperating, they leave low voltage electrodes in water, a fuzzy assemblage of nauseous fits. When cleaning or bringing food, they'll arrive with wax stuck in their ears, scared I may hum a few notes. Every day I practice total immobility, stillness worthy of a Zen master, and float like that goldfish your kid has forgotten to feed for an entire week. Now, picture the scene. Mr. Barnum coming closer to check on his motionless specimen. Picture him as he slowly opens the tank. Now, a sudden leap. Teeth arrayed about his throat, refusing to let go. The child comes out as a merman. When right after sunset, darkness landed on our living room like a butterfly on an open flower, Mother didn't bother to switch on the lights and kept watching the telly laid on our sofa, the telly blasting, sinners, sinners. While standing by the threshold to the kitchen, I announced, my voice all jelly, I'm a merman now. And Mother looked at me for a second, nodded, and tucked her lips again into a blanket of silence. The morning after, I found a leaflet next to my pillow, content I could not decipher, with pictures as bright as sun-filled bubbles of morality. Mother said if I wanted to learn how to swim, they'd pay for lessons. Dad in the car pestered me with lectures about being only 13 and knowing nothing, being full of nothing. You shall not lie with a creature of the sea, for they have no soul, and only by marrying a creature of land may they acquire one. I started taking baths before sleep and went to bed so wet I'd soak the sheets. Then started sleeping in the bathtub all night. I joined my legs tight with an elastic band, enjoyed every cramp, every cold shiver. The next day, screams and thumps out of the bathroom door woke me up as I delayed everyone's morning routine. Over breakfast, Mother insisted once more. I was clueless. I said I'd found a new God, one more tender, one that allowed for mellowness. Mother shook her head. Dad shouted to go to my room, called me an abomination. I refused to eat their food. I asked Mother to cook seaweed. They decided to leave me alone, shadow sewing button eyes on ghost dolls. No one took a bath in the evening. They noticed me less and less. Once they watched a stand-up show on the telly, had their chests shake with so much laughter they couldn't hear a thing. Once the water in my bathtub was all cherry. I tried to stop the flowers of my wrists from blossoming. This queer mer boys can't get any rest. In this depth lamentous with waves slosh, their skins so mother of pearl, and others sombre ebony. Some have never felt sunlight, some absorb darkness from the abyss, laid on tiny grains and pebbles, a Flemish painting of vivid blues, cerulean silks of sand and waves, sapphire, lapis, emerald, wild fish and cephalopods. The older ones warned them that scales would grow restless, tails twist in tremor, cheeks farouche with first blushes that melt each member down to the cartilaginous core. Bodies have uses other than swimming. If caught in fishnets, things would happen. They've all heard the stories of sailors from land with expert hands that know what to do, where to touch. Men took us in their arms, cuddled us at first, lips fastened to lips. We begged for hands to hold our throats, feet pressed on our faces. We will be docile, our tongues laid out like summer, throats agape and ruby, limbs scattered, a kitsch souvenir, or under glass for study and observation. The sea sprinkled with flotsam and jetsam, caudal fins, operculum, gills, epidermis. Look at what's left of us in the cold distance, loathsome and rancorous lovers. Lisa, I believe I do have like 2-3 more minutes. Is that correct?
Yep, you're good for a couple more, Serge.
Thank you. I'll just, this poem I'm going to read has been shortlisted by the lovely Andrew Macmillan for the Winchester Poetry Competition. It's called For Every Queer They Kill, a Merman is Born, and it's in memory of Marsha P. Johnson. And when that happens, little brothers, know that nobody can end us, not even the dawn with its scented knives of glare. Remember the flower-crowned goddess that fought for us first, her hordes of sharks, her troops of whales, purpled waves and harpoons lost to history, how the slander of that metal rusts away under the sand. Forget the tears, unravel the silk of your grief to the current, let it carry further into the tidal swell. Leave the toxic bits of you down a crevasse where nobody can find them. Crustaceans will have their fill. Prescriptions, pills, intravenous drips. Here you are never sick. Here a blue prayer, glacial drone of light pierces from above with gentle arrows. Remember, desire is a holy thing. Think of the letter Q, a drooling mouth, awkwardly breaking the pace of the alphabet, always in need for another. Claim both water and land. Let the silver of your scales dictate the dance of human stairs. Right, and I'm going to close with another new poem which recently appeared in Finished Creatures. This is called Merman in the City, Slithering. Here the bellow from the mouth of night, esophagus of poplars, where we slither, the bluebells dwindle, like carnivores stumbling in their own hunger. This city picks our flesh clean, wait in many alleys, road junctions, a sudden downdraft. These vodka went in my head too quickly. I feel wires under the tarmac feeding into each other, traveling to streetlights. I switch to hospital thoughts, lots of cholesterol talk. How many kinds of broken can you think of? Way too many. Thank you.
Thank you, Serge. Those were amazing. I always love the way your poems reclaim, remake, and reincarnate, you know, that and those new gods of tenderness and the strength that comes from those changes. Thank you so much. We have Alice Hillier. Alice is a poet and an activist moving between the UK and France. She works experimentally along channels of play and subversion to change awareness around sexual abuse in childhood. Her debut collection, Bird of Winter, is due out from Pavilion in April this year, and I will be posting a link so you can pre-order. I have already got mine in and I'm very excited about that. Alice's poetry makes that fearless commitment to say the difficult but really necessary thing. It builds strength through a confrontation with silence. So Alice, I'm really looking forward to you read. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's fantastic to be here, and I'm particularly honoured to be reading with Tolu and Serge, whose books I own and love, and I hope everybody else does as well. When I was first asked to work with the theme of strength, I was daunted. None of us is feeling that strong right now. But I realised that keeping going when we're feeling daunted or defeated is actually where strength comes in. 2 days ago, File on 4 on Radio 4 ran a landmark programme investigating women who sexually abused children and adolescents. This was my own experience between 8 and 13, when my abuser was my own mother. It's led to my work to change awareness around this crime. Sexual abuse by abusers of all genders has tragically flourished under lockdown conditions. I've therefore created a reading which I hope will help all of us connect with children who are being subjected to this crime currently, and adults like me making their lives in its aftermath. There are excellent charities, Barnardo's, but millions of others, working in this area who urgently need financial support, or if you're able to make a donation or otherwise volunteer. Mind has a really good list of them on their website, which is going to appear in the chat box. Also, contact them if you want help personally around this issue. As Lisa said, the poems I'll be sharing are in my forthcoming collection, Bird of Winter, which is going to be published by Pavilion. For now, you can find more about my work on my website, Alice Hillier at WordPress. I've tried to make this reading a safe space for everyone. But if the subject is difficult for you, please unplug your headphones now. I'm hoping you'll all feel safe. And as I say, I'm very concerned to keep people safe. And there's nothing directly violent or explicit. The first poem, Pistol, remembers when I was very young. The grooming was already underway. It's structured around the names for the female reproductive parts of a flower. It uses notes, my childhood medical notes in the first segment, which reflect how what was being done to me was already impacting my behaviour. So Pistol. Pistol has been well apart from German measles while in France. Aggressive and difficult with other children, bites and scratches. Difficult to get her off to sleep at night, i.e. spoiled. Ovule, your tummy a hardening ball of ache. Stigma, Papa's photo shows you aged 2 in a field of French buttercups with your red anorak zipped and the sky holding you. The next poem remembers an event when I was 4 or maybe 5, when the grooming was picking up pace. Let none of this enter you. Child, your closed lids are the hulls of my dreams. Do not betray me. Do not pee in your pants to smell like your mother, or get into the bath where she has peed already. I would rather the masts of your boat put out my eyes than see you there between those white thighs like her good girl. Grooming creates a situation where the child becomes progressively less able to resist their abuser. When the abuse begins, silence and submission are guaranteed. St. James's Park in autumn. On the lake, the double ducks swim, glued breast to breast. One is held under, the other rides on top. For me, the tipping point between grooming and continuous abuse came with the death of my diplomat father when I was 8. After that, we moved from our Brussels flat to a rented cottage in Wiltshire. I was separated from all the adults who knew me, including my French grandmother and my teachers. Bird of Winter uses Pompeii and Herculaneum to explore what I excavate from the ashes of my past and the process of bringing lost things to light, as you'll see with this next poem, On the Shoreline. The violent ground surge, followed immediately by a glowing avalanche, came without warning. A shattered skeleton blown off a terrace 60 feet above the marina. A Roman soldier slammed face down above sword and scabbard testifies to the force of the blast. Papa, there was no chronology for your illness. Nothing was said when you needed the stick, then the wheelchair. You sent me drawings from the hospital until your body became the house through which death walked, but did not close the door. My strongest memory of those first nights in Wiltshire after my father died is their coldness and how the foggy December days never became fully light. Circular. The ball is me, caught in lank winter grass, slick as the hair between the legs, in the bedroom which the round moon peeks into, then looks away. A child who is subjected to sexual abuse almost inevitably becomes emotionally frozen, locking everything away to survive. Snowfall. Cold is over everything. People scoop and throw handfuls. The sun is slipping down over the edge of the earth. Cold has stolen all the colour and stripped the trees. Birds have nowhere to shelter. Small ones fall off branches and lie without moving. Cold says, you are not loved. You are not wanted. I am the tower, and the tower is my silence. I am the cold, and the cold is all over. Speak, winter, inhabit me. In my case, spring and change were brought in by the stirrings of puberty when I was rising 13. Although I wasn't overweight and never ever looked at myself in the mirror, I decided to stop eating, to take control of my body, while also trying to say no to my abuser. My refusal only became effective after the significant weight loss began and doctors became involved. Because I shut my mouth to potatoes, at Easter, the time comes to refuse mother. In France for half term, she orders pintade. Between the sheets, hawk dives my first hares. All summer I live on oranges and water, watching my skeleton walk backwards. After, the school nurse weighs me daily. By October, I enter the wind's teeth. And hospital plates grow big as straw hats, while I peel off my mind fruit the knife opens. Being sent to hospital by my school brought me physical safety, but unfortunately anorexia was still seen as a disease of over-ambitious middle-class girls in the late 1970s. Because I regained my weight once separated from my abuser, no real inquiry was made into my background or what had triggered me to stop eating. The protocol described in the next poem is taken from a book by Peter Daly, who was a leading anorexia specialist at the time and one of the 2 psychiatrists who treated me. Primary or classical anorexia, 1977. In the dark, Sparrow becomes clever and pretty. Feather by feather plucked, recovery is easier for fledglings. Some nights tore, starvation sews fine down over her body. Carried away, made to keep still. Tranquilizers improve, eating and sleeping. Her clawed breast would regrow. Psychosexual conflict is inadmissible and unseemly. Even after I got out of hospital, my adolescence was a very rough ride, saved ultimately by the birth of my elder son when I was just 18. It took me until I was 30 to start speaking about my childhood with a psychotherapist, and another decade plus to find a way to write about what had happened to me and bring that time of darkness into the healing light of day. Uprising in blue and silver. My anger rings the anvil which shoes the mare. Where I was ridden, hooves crescent the sky. For me, community has become a place where I find love and strength, as my final poem honours. I'm hoping that Bird of Winter may be of support to people who share my history of being groomed and abused in childhood, and those who work with us. When we're heard and our experiences of this criminal assault are acknowledged, healing becomes possible. Sea level. There will always be the city beneath this city, charted by no one, where columns of stone tiers cling to the ceilings, whose people were once lost or vaporized, their houses and temples buried and forgotten. But let these people, who are my people, enter your lives again, and hope will shaft passages up through the bedrock until we swim free within the breathing harbour of morning. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. I'm always in awe of how you transmute silence into strength, how your poems take a difficult journey and move them into the landscape and center stage so that we can find a place of community and a place where people can find strength together, grow, and hopefully address these very challenging experiences. So thank you so much. Our next reader tonight is Tolu Agbelusi. Tolu is a Nigerian-British poet, playwright, educator, and lawyer. Her debut collection, Locating Strong Woman, was published last year. She's been shortlisted for the 2018 White Review Poetry Prize. Her work's been published in many journals and anthologies, including White Review, Wilderness Journal, Ake Review, and Pittsburgh Poetry Review. She's been on many stages, including the Cheltenham Literature Festival, Stanza Poetry in Scotland, and in Poetry Africa. If you live in the Exeter area, or you can get to Exeter, do check out her project with Keywords and Libraries Unlimited, and I'll try to post the link if I can find it. And her collection actually, I think, Tolu, do correct me if this isn't right, but is now available on audiobook, so you can hear her again if technology is not helping tonight for you. Tolu's poetry speaks to unperformed living, to womanhood, and to strength. Tolu, I'm really looking forward to you reading tonight.
Thank you. Right. Thank you for having me, Lisa, and also Jenny. Very apt, very apt theme, considering my book, which deals a lot with strength and how to reimagine it and find it in the places we don't usually look, I guess. So I'll be doing different poems, which I hope challenge the reader or the audience tonight on what it is to be strong and where you find it. The first poem in my book is where I'll start tonight, and it's called Faking Death to Avoid Sex is Not Extreme. Death is a mating ritual. The base of my wings hacked, a male seizing my body mid-flight. It's a vice, spiny claspers from a dragon hunter who doesn't care that his iron hold gouges my eyes, pierces my head, splits my chitin. This is a death I can come back from, only if I'm quick. freeze mid-air, plunge to ground or vegetation, make a corpse of my body. Let the hunter hover, for as long as it will take him to believe I have perished, or at least that I cannot be coerced into being prey. Does it matter if I'm always escaping? If I can't let myself be carefree? Sister Damselfly changed the rules, colluded with evolution to turn her green stripes blue to mimic the males, trick them away from harassment. It worked for a while. I may lose a limb in the fall, but if he ceases pursuit, do I not win? Is this not how we practice being strong? Breaking ourselves in pieces so we can choose the one fragment that stays whole. That poem is obviously a conversation with a female dragonfly, which I find replicates real life a lot, except of course the dragonfly might plunge to the ground and get to live another day, but often times when sexual abuse is at the fore, you can do whatever you want, but it doesn't help. And that was what struck me about Thanatosis in dragonflies and how that relates or crosses over to humanity. I'll lift the mood a little. This next one I'm gonna do is called I Found Home. And it's in two parts. One, I met a man who could have been any man, only he wasn't.
Oh, yeah. Get everyone to read to myself.
What kind of absurdity makes one want to spend time learning an obscure language? He became fluent in me for the sake of it. Invested enough time to decipher my laughter dialects, pure release, stuttered in warning, muddied with questions or cluttered with doubt. He studied every detail, convinced he was reviving a city we could call home. Came alive, accumulating vocabulary, connecting them like puzzle patterns. When he said, "You are beautiful," it was deeper than high cheekbones, curved hips, soft moans, or compliments issued as one part of a bargain. If an acerbic tone caused him to stumble or consider walking away, he never did. How could he? How could he leave a home he worked so hard to restore? Questioning this and contemplating that, he stripped me down. Clothes, self-doubt, labels I held too close that weren't mine. At first, I fought the probing, the attention. I wasn't used to it. Didn't ask why he thought I was worth it. Couldn't challenge his conviction. Didn't want to. How could I throw a brick through the walls we had restored together when I had begun to believe? 2, when at last I understand that being my own woman is a house I must build from scratch, must choose every brick, must reject most donations for. I started with what I knew. One morning, when a full moon tinted the ocean silver white, we marveled at its splendor. I caught him gazing at my face with the same awe. This isn't about him. But the way he loved me with no remorse was impressive. I wanted to love myself like that. I gave up the craft of busyness for its own sake, courted silence until I wasn't afraid to be still, to stare at my own face, my own body, beyond skin, and be confronted with shame I'd accepted without questions. All the things they said a real woman was that I wasn't. The shame I owned for wanting to opine without apology, though not for empty attention. To love my own deep voice, the roundness in my face that no diet would shed. When the borrowed and donated things were as tangible as a false wall, I pulled them down. I now know where the floorboards creak, which doors are not good for access, which jarring paint I refuse to change, what it feels like to be at peace with myself, all of myself. I hate to iron, but I find that many things, many mundane things are ritualistic in the way that they can be healing, and healing in the way that they can strengthen us in moments when we don't know that's what's happening. This is a short poem called The Roots Are Many. And you will understand why I segued into ironing in a second. And when the night calls me, not to bed, but casts its light over the little used ironing board, an invitation to lay hands over perturbed thoughts, choose what will continue to take up space or burn or be put away. And when I succumb, gripping the iron, the cloth, hope, bound in the motion of a hand passing heat left to right over a crease, willing it to disappear as proof that the disheveled can be smooth again. What is it? What is it if not prayer? My next poem is called Bell. A daughter hell-bent on gorging herself with computer-generated beauty. A daughter who refuses to see herself, who can't. Not when she pledges devotion to no carbs, no fat, low proteins, no balance. Stomach pounding from want. Skin dissolving from bones. When at last she agrees to listen, not to her mother, but to me, her mother's friend. If I shadow her footsteps to the kitchen, wrap an arm around her poking clavicle, I will reveal that I hated my body once. Wide thighs, broad nostrils, all of it. If I keep the silence until her disbelief thaws, she may ask a question, then another. If I extend a mirror and at last she sees herself in caricature, if the questions continue, she is plotting the return of cushioned bones. If at that moment her mother slumps in another room, she is shedding the heaviness her body nurtured, those dark months of exhausting all her energy, defying her daughter's plea to join the afterlife. How it begins. When I play the number game, demand a report of 40 hands on the white rectangular tables, Aisha goes missing. I say 200 fingers and the noise of 190 fingers banging the tables sends visible shivers through Aisha. Blink, and I'd have missed her spring from her seat before catching herself, pushing her body back into the chair, hands pressed into her lap. Usually, even before my ruler attempts to summon silence by slapping the white from a blackboard, she would be pencil sharp, book open, expectant against the chaos in my class of 2010-year-olds. Later, the class teacher offered me answers. Strolling home yesterday, Aisha didn't notice Jamie and his little brother until he grabbed her hand and rammed her back into the dust, edged her panties aside for a dagger of fingers. Her teeth clamped into the tiny hands covering her mouth. Rumor says he screamed louder than her. He is only 7. After lunch, when I see Aisha, she is staring into space again, as if mourning what Jamie stole from her. The moment he enters the classroom, her face hardens. On another day, the glares thrust between them would have passed for child's play, but today, when class is over, Aisha transfers her book into a backpack. She is already practicing a life of walking the tightrope between a silence that chokes and a silence that will make believe it is a sanctuary. There's a center in my book that has lines borrowed from Lucille Clifton, Rilke, Norman McKeag, Doug Anderson, Derek Mahon, Jack Maponge, and Nikki Giovanni. It's a short poem to have so many people in it, but sometimes it's like that. The epigraph is from Rilke, translated by Stephen Mitchell, and it says, "Here, there is no place that doesn't see you. You are confronted with yourself each year, eyes like ripening fruit. The 38th year of my life, I had not expected to be an ordinary woman, plain as bread. Silence arrives like a servant to tidy things up. I had expected more. Such days when the sun's in a drawer and the drawer is locked. I have forgotten the why of everything. I sense an indifference larger than anything. I had expected more than this. I offer no apology. I will skip without your rope. Since you say I should not, I will create my own." And in the same way as Alice ended in community as a way of garnering strength, I feel it's only right I do the same. This is called Museum of Women. And yeah. Praise for the mothers. Their love like an expensive scrub, scraping away what is dead and what needs to die, soothing the afterburn. Praise for the sisters who show up without needing to ask what is wrong. Arms full of plantains, portable joy, who swathe your body before it can fall apart. Praise for the women who write books about women who challenge us to live beyond survival. For the girls whose stories incite renaissance. Praise for all the women who chorus groans when the truth is too heavy for words. Artists quietly molding, mending, retouching me into a masterpiece even when I don't yet acknowledge I am still under construction. If I ever said I made it this far alone, I lied. Thank you.
to ask you both about writing dangerously, if I may. Tolu, I was really struck about the idea of being a woman building the house of yourself. Your poems address the process of arriving at a self-honouring identity and the societal, the familial, and the internalised challenges that are encountered and overcome on the way. Did it feel like a dangerous topic to explore because you go into a lot of vulnerability, and that's, in a sense, it's both the opposite of strength and the expression of strength. So yes, writing dangerously to build the house of yourself.
I mean, I feel like you kind of, the answer is already in what you said. It's at once supposedly the opposite of strength to be vulnerable, but it's also the embodiment of it. And dangerous, yes, because it's exposing, I guess. But it's also liberating to be able to just fully accept every part of yourself as the best example of strength, as the best, the biggest epitomization of strength. So that in that way, no, it isn't. I feel like the writing, and with any writing, whether it's strength or anything else, I feel like the point at which you know you're hitting the right thing is when it starts to feel like, oh no, maybe I don't want to go. I don't want to go there. And that is the point where you should push to see what exactly the poem is trying to say, right? So that in terms of the danger, I tend to go with discovery wherever the poem is pushing me to. I think it's Dean Myers that says the poem doesn't intend, it attends. So I try to attend to whatever is coming to me. And if there's danger there, it's not really what I'm thinking about in that moment. So yeah.
Well, I felt a kind of immense gain hearing you read. It was like I could rush in on your coattails. You were saying things that I was thinking, yeah, I relate to that. That's making actually me feel strong. You know, you going into those dangerous places was giving me a sort of an inhalation of strength. Paradoxically, it was very moving, and I'm sure a lot of other people felt that hearing you read.
Thank you.
And yeah, Serge, your poems are open about sexual predation and exploitation, especially of younger by older men within the queer community, and the harm that this can engender. That must have taken some courage to write about, because the queer community has not had a very kind time for centuries at the kind of hands of the heteronormative world. So to say that actually there's mean stuff going on behind the pink padded doors is a brave statement. Did it feel brave to you?
I don't know that it felt brave. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that we haven't had an easy time for centuries, because my purpose with some of these poems was exactly to celebrate our resilience as a community. They've tried to get rid of us many times in many ways. They never managed to. We're still here. We're still thriving. I wanted these poems to be, as dark as some of them may be, to be a song of freedom. Here we are. You can't get rid of us. You can't. And there, yes, there's courage in going in those dark places where you don't feel like going, but at the same time, we are rebuilding ourselves in anew. We are rebuilding ourselves in things of beauty, and it's just, I think it's worthy. I think it's all good work, and I'm in awe of your poems and Tolu's poems, because you both do, you both reach through to that dangerous zone so skillfully and with such beauty that it's just amazing to me.
Well, I think songs of freedom, you know, that's the best. That's a wonderful way of describing, in a way, what the three of us are trying to sing.
And it's amazing how freedom is both an act of danger, but also an act of strength. You know, a moment of reclamation.
simply, starting to write. And by the time I started to write, there were quite a few queer poets around. So, you need to kind of find your own voice in a way. Not everyone likes that term, but yeah. And I've always been obsessed with mermaids. So I just thought, and it sounds very basic as I explain it. Mermaids and queerness, bam, combine them together. It is, oh yeah, I do drawings on the pamphlets sometimes. So why not? But it gained significance as I went along. This metaphor, it became, because the sea world is so powerful, but it hides so many things, and queer people always have to hide some part of themselves. At the same time, mermaids are very ancient figures. We've always gone back to them, whether in art, literature, architecture, Starbucks logo. So
very aware that I'm writing about a child or a teenager, and they are very, very delicate beings. However awful the things that are done to them are, they are young and they are delicate, and I wanted to try and hold that delicacy. I'm also trying to be careful about the reader and give the reader space to breathe in the poem, because it's a very, very tough subject matter. And so again, it's that sense of restraint, but also trying to be the opposite of what was done to me. What was done to me was not kind and not delicate. And I want to speak about it in a language which shows kindness to my past self, to other children in that position, and the reader, and to keep them as safe as possible. So thank you for asking that.
So each of us, in our own way, we write for and about our communities. How can we help our own communities to grow and thrive? How can we, through our writing, through our tutoring, or through other way, how can we help our communities? And the other question is, many of our poems deal with abuse, violence to younger, into children and younger people. How do we have these hard conversations with children that the world is not always safe, like without depriving them of hope? Of course, it's such a hard conversation to have. And Alice, I know you're a mother, and Tolu, you talk about daughters in your own writing. So how can we do that?
I'll go first. I'll just talk about children and keeping safe. I think around the idea of sexual abuse, it's very, very difficult. I didn't tell my children until they were adults. I didn't want them to have to live with that knowledge while they were growing up. I think we have to exercise great care. Children who've been subjected to abuse are in a different category, and they need to have as much openness as they want. But I think that for other children, the conversations need to be layered, and they need to be able to take them as far as they want to. I think if you can give a child a sense of their own body being their own property, and that only they can touch it and do things with it, then that's really a more, and if anyone tries to do something or to touch their body, then that's a bad thing to have happen. I think it's better to try and communicate things at a child's level, so you give them safety without terrifying them. And again, I think when you're talking to teenagers, and I think this is a very, very important conversation, again, you need to give them a sense of their agency within their own body, that it is their own and it's their own choices, and that it's a really good idea to take your time about decisions, not to be influenced by other people. And I think if you can sort of really focus on the body as a stronghold, that's your great place, and that no one else can push you into doing things with, that's my approach. That's the best way. But if that is not the case, And I'm going to be doing some work, hopefully with the NHS, around safeguarding and GPs. I think the most important thing, and I said this to a friend of mine who's a paediatrician, is that when you're talking to a child who's been abused, you need to give them the sense that the abuse is not them. They are the things they love, the things they enjoy, the people they love them, who love them. Their identity resides in their positive experiences. And when I spoke to this paediatrician who has to interview children in this position, he said it was very, very helpful. I said, you know, ask them, do they like football? What television programs do they like? Try and get them to locate their identity in the positive experiences of their life and see the assaults that have been done onto them as something that doesn't belong to them, that belongs to somebody else and can be shut out through a process of talking. And I think that's a very, you always want to focus for the child, your body is your own, no one else belongs in there. It's your safe place, it's beautiful, it's good. And I think that's a very serious message for me.
To build community or empower community. I mean, something Alice said earlier when you were talking about the poems, that in a weird way, by saying it, you release another person to be strong. I think putting work down, any of us who write, putting work down in a way that is detailed and that captures strong emotion is always going to empower somebody you've never met who thinks that whatever they went through was just them, and who by seeing it on paper feels comforted. So the work in itself, I feel, is already a way of doing something for community. But beyond that, I mean, I teach in different capacities, and poetry is always for me, it's not just that I'm teaching a creative writing class or I'm teaching poetry. Poetry is a tool. It's one way of self-expression. It's one way of chiseling your voice so that it hits the target. And by encouraging other people to do that and giving them the tools to be able to do it, I feel like that itself is also something that builds community and that reminds other people that they live in community, so that everything that you're doing in some shape or form is reflected. You're reflecting the things that are around you in addition to yourself. So yeah, the work, life, all of it feeds in and does that in terms of community.
Yeah, I think for me, community is absolutely critical. And I have a sense of community to people who, like me, have experienced sexual abuse in childhood. And the one thing I know from my own experience is it's very, very difficult to talk about. It's difficult, first of all, to start talking about it to anyone. And then it's actually difficult to retrieve the memories and to express them. So, and I've done a lot of work with a psychotherapist. I didn't get here just by being good and brave and strong. I got here by being helped and helped and helped. And so it's very important, I feel, to have, I want my poems to be places, I want them to be boxes that people with my history can pick up and look into and can find something of their own experience expressed if they choose to, because it can be very difficult to express. So that's one element, that sense of being of service to my community, creating forms of expression through which they can recognize themselves. And generally when I perform, very sadly, it's usually 1 in 10 people in the audience identifies themselves after as having a history of abuse. And that's unfortunately consistent. And so that's one sort of community. The other sort of community that I get a lot of strength from is tonight, that sense of creative community. I run a workshop, some of our members are here. We're about to put up a site with videos called Voicing Our Silences. It's a poetry workshop, but I interviewed Isabel Baffy, Kostas Soulakis and Joanna Ingham have just spoken to each other. RG Manuel Pillai spoke to Maya Elsner. We've got more people coming up. We've got Chaucer in the audience. We've got Geoffrey in the audience who are coming up. And that is, we've got a format of performance, reading, interview, and workshop. And the idea is that you can hear people talking about their work, you can hear them perform it, and then you can have some workshop exercises. So that is a sense of, we are a creative community, we support each other, working with often difficult materials, but we want to spread that love out into the community and have it not behind a paywall, because a lot of resources are behind paywalls, and I feel very strongly at the moment, and my fellow poets feel, that we need to not be limited by geography, not be limited by income, but just try and spread that process out. And I'll send out to the list the website name once it's up. So yes, but I think for me, community is everything, you know, and also you can fight. It's sometimes hard to fight for yourself, but you can fight for the people you love for. And that's what community is. And that's where we find our strength. My form is, they start longer and they get smaller. And I often find I solve a problem by taking quite a lot of the poem away. I think for me, I'm aware that in the subject matter that I'm writing about, sexual abuse, we can never tell the whole story. It's lost in memory, it's lost in time. And actually working with fragments, cutting down, strangely enough, becomes truer. It leaves more space for the reader. And as I say, you know, I'll think this isn't working, and then I'll take a lot of it away, and suddenly the tiny bit that left, you know, is doing the job. So yes, I definitely pare things down, and leave a lot of space on the page. I also think work like that, less is more. You know?
For me, the form of whichever poem it is depends on what it is that I'm dealing with. I believe in the way the poem is packaged being as much a part of the storytelling as the story that is being told itself. So that, for example, I've got a poem that goes When the Bomb Blasts, which started as a very compact poem, but the narrative was disjointed. And by the time it had gone through all its edits in the book, the poem itself is a bomb exploding. And the narrative is way more disjointed than I thought I could ever do myself, if I wasn't pushed by a good editor. But sometimes that is part of the process. So there are times when I use traditional form, not a lot of times. I think there is probably one main one where I do that in my book. There's a sestina somewhere. And I think there's probably one other one, which I can't recall right now. But apart from that, I use the what do you call it? I use the tools from traditional forms in my free verse work, and I pare down as necessary.
Form is a bit of a haunting thing. I often say this, I feel like the poem is something that knocks on the back door of your mind and asks you, can I come alive? Can you give me a body? And the job of the poet is to, you know, make the body fit. It has to be the right body, it has to have the right shape. And it's a weird process. For me, it's a lot of mumbling to myself. There's a lot of almost chanting to myself. There's the oral part of it is really important. And then, as Alice and Tolu both said, there's a lot of cutting out. Sometimes writing, sometimes just rewriting the poem upside down. You know, lots of things. It's chaos. Can't be helped, I think.
Ooh. Honesty. The fact that I'm not trying to be something and I'm not trying to make it do something. I want to see what it has to tell me. Kind of similar to what Serge said just now about the poem is knocking and asking what buddy. I think it's Din Myers who says, no, somebody else says that you're just the vessel that it goes through. You're the body it couldn't have gone through. That the gods needed the body for it to go through, and yours was there, and you just need to accept whatever is coming your way. So I try to accept what is coming my way, not to impose myself on the poem, and also not to be too focused on necessarily what I think the poem needs to do, because then I might end up imposing myself on it instead of letting it be what it needs to do. I'm always reading and rereading this. This is Forest Primeval by Vivi Francis, who is one of my favorite poets. And then a new one that I am reading right now is The Gaze by Nee Parks. Those are, I'll put it in the chat, but those are my two recommendations. Both of them write very, there's a lot of, you can see it. And as a person who writes, there have been lots of moments in both books when I'm like, how the hell did they do that? Like, I want to do that. So those are my recommendations.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to adding to my reading list. It's always amazing to hear what other people are reading. Serge, what would you like to recommend to us in terms of poetry that gives you strength or just inspires you?
There's lots of queer poets here. I've got Mark Ward is an Irish queer poet, and his pamphlet Carcass is amazing and just stupendous, honestly. Then I've got lovely Paul Kostiaslaki's pamphlet. Alice, were you going to suggest that too? Yeah, I thought that. But it's so beautiful, and honestly, he's such a skillful writer. It can't be helped. We have named Isabel Buffy as well, right? Sorry, I'm stealing all your suggestions, Alice.
Lots more. It's good. It's good. I'm agreeing.
It's amazing. Ostra.
Like poetry snap.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Okay. Ostra Papakristodolou is a more experimental poet and thrilling work. Phoebe Stokes, Platinum Blonde. Again, a beautiful collection by Bloodaxe. These are my suggestions for now, but if I can just give one more suggestion of a pamphlet which is not out yet. In the audience, there's Stuart Macpherson, and he's an amazing poet, and he deals with a lot of the themes that Alice deals with from a male perspective. And I think both Alice and Stuart write such important work, and people need to read more of this.
Thank you, Serge. It's amazing to have a recommendation fresh off the press as well. If you could put those recommendations in the chat, that would be amazing for anybody who hasn't quite caught from the visuals. Alice, do share yours. I know we've had a bit of poetry snap already, but I know you've got a lot more to share.
Right. Well, I've got Paul by Caleb Femi, and That Reminds Me by Derek Owusu. They are both really amazing books. I absolutely recommend you read them. They're incredibly original. Caleb's has his own photos. They are speaking to the capital B Black young male identity, which has been so silenced and marginalized and ignored. And I think it's crucial that everybody gets hold of these books and reads them. Portrait of the Artist as a Mature Woman. Meet Pascal Petty's witch grandmother in Tiger Girl. You Won't Forget Her. How to Wash a Heart, Banu Kapil, and Defamation, Sasha Dugdale. They're both really wonderful books by women at the top of their game, asking society very difficult questions about itself, but doing so with the most fantastic poems. And I have to say, Isabel, I'm going to give another big up to. I think she's one of the most important young poets coming out of London at the moment. Her pamphlet was just the Poetry Book Society choice, or will be for spring. Really read that. And another key young female poet, young in poetry terms, Romelin Ante, Antiemetic for Homesickness. It's really writes the migrant experience from within. She came age 16 from the Philippines. It's an extraordinary collection. It's so generous. It looks from her point of view, but it also looks from her community's point of view. And I'm going to post tomorrow an interview performance with her and Pascal. So that's all. I'm just trying to think. And yeah, my little kind of queer recommendations, RG by Queer Like Me, wonderful Kostya. They both write out of the family experience and beyond the family experience, that claiming of self. So I think that's probably all I'm allowed, but buy them all. They're fantastic.
Thank you so much, Alison. And I know we've had a few recommendations repeat, but do put those in the chat for people who haven't caught them.
Yeah,
it's amazing to have all that, those suggestions to feed us and make us stronger in the months to come, especially where we might have limited options for entertainment. I have to say, books have been a savior of all my life, both in terms of silence and being alone and moving into a place of strength. Thank you so much to all the poets tonight, for sharing your strength, for sharing your work. Your work is incredibly powerful, it's incredibly strong, and I think it makes us all stronger. Thank you for talking about how we can all grow into strength, both in terms of our poetry, but in terms of how we live our lives. It has been an extremely inspiring evening. Thank you also to everybody who's joined us tonight. I know it's a dark winter's night and sometimes that's hard as well. It's just wonderful to be in community with you all tonight. So thank you very much.